Welcome back to Austin P State University theater class. We are starting in on a new chapter, chapter 5, and we're talking about kind of the day in the life of a theater. Or another way to think about it, we'll be talking a lot about job descriptions. Some of you get up every morning and you go into your place of business to sit at a desk or, screw tires on cars. You have a job that you go and do. And for some people, for me for a long time, the theater is where you do your job. So we're going to talk about some different job descriptions in theater, particularly in the technical side. I love the Stanislavski quote, "Great art conceals art." Have you ever been watching the Olympics or some big sporting event and you think how easy it looks? They make it look so easy. Well, that's kind of the cruel thing about theater tech side. When it's done well, you may not even think about how many hands are there to make your production flow and have continuity and look normal. It takes a lot of theatrical tricks to make something look like everyday life. Some examples, if you've ever been to a concert or a theater production when the the spotlight on the actor, is with them and you don't even think about the fact that there's someone operating that soundboard, but then the second it gets behind or it moves unexpectedly, then everybody turns and looks at the spotlight booth, right? Same thing with a mic. You may not even think about the person wearing a microphone until it gets feedback, right? Until we hear that high screeching sound, and then we think, somebody's not doing their job right. Whereas we're much less likely to go through the entire program without any mic problems and then walk up to the soundboard operator after the show and say, "Oh, good job on the sound today. The mic sounded great." Because it's an invisible art. It's something that if you do it well, you don't even notice that it's going well. Right? The same can be true of a set change. If a technician, a stagehand, is able to get on stage and get off stage in the darkness and set the furniture exactly right or move a piece, and then we may not even think that a person had to do that, right? But if change takes a long time or we hear them drop something, then we realize that their job has not done well. So that's sort of the tricky thing about stagehands and set people. We don't realize that they're there until they mess up. So next time you're at a production and you walk by the tech booth, you may want to just say, "Good job tonight, guys," because they probably don't get that as much as the actors. They're the visible ones. They're the ones we see. And there are more people than just what we see. So to kind of show you this, I want to take you to a theater, Nashville Children's Theater. I wish this was a regular classroom and I could walk you down to the theater downstairs, but you can think of this as our little adventure outside of the classroom. So, the Nashville Children's Theater is one of the longest running children's theater in the country. Very, very successful. If you've never been, take a friend, take a cousin, take a niece or nephew. It's a really wonderful place. But you can see all these names of people who go into Nashville Children's Theater every day to work. So, some people that we'll talk about later, the front of house manager, right? What does he do? Mr. Bob Roberts. We'll talk about costuming and properties and producers. Here they have a producing director, which is the same thing as a producer. So you can see all this administrative staff. These people go in to work at Nashville Children's Theater every day. But I also wanted to show you, they have kind of a tour of their theater. So most theaters, when you walk in the door, there's going to be a lobby, a place to wait before the seating area opens. And in theater, we call that the house. Before the house opens, this is kind of a place where you can wait, where you can buy your tickets, where you can get concessions. Probably more familiar with a movie theater, but the same concept relates to theater. So in their lobby, they have some cool kind of pictures of costumes, mannequins set up here. Another trend we see is putting the design sketches out in the lobby. I've seen that at a lot of theaters lately, and I'm glad to see that. So you can kind of see, that was a cute little image there. Yay! A lot of theaters do have television screens, and they record the program as it's being presented. And so if you have a horrible cough, if you come in late and you can't actually go into the theater, many times you can watch it in the lobby on the television screens. But that's not going to happen to you because you're going to have cough drops and you're going to show up early for your production. Right? Right? Yeah. So then we go inside the theater. Right? You can see up here, this is, well, that's just the comfort room for people, once again, who have to cough or nurse. The sound booth is often, or the light booth, up high. Now that's because the spotlight operator, they're going to get a better angle from up high. They also kind of have a better view of the stage. These here you can see are just acoustic panels. This is the orchestra pit, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about the theater of the spaces. Right? And then, of course, there is the stage, and there's what is called a trap system, where the floor opens up and you can crawl underneath the stage. That's fun as well. But that's what the Nashville Children's Theater, Explore Hill Theater looks like on the inside. So then we move our way to the scene shop. The scene shop is where they build the scenery. Right, yay, scenery. So you can see sometimes that includes properties, which we'll talk about more, anything you can take onto stage, right? They show the different productions that used those pieces of furniture, which I think is kind of cool. When I worked at a theater and you walk through the scenery shop, it's kind of fun because you look around and you see, oh yeah, this reminds me of that show I was in, Seussical. And always a lot of woodworking and painting going on in the scene shop. Most of the set is built in the scene shop and then toted out onto the stage for the performance. But remember, time is money in the theater, and so when we move things, we often rent the space or have something on stage at all times. So that changeover between building things in the shop and then getting it out on stage needs to happen relatively quickly. So cool. So this is the costume shop where they build. You can see a wig down here that they used for Miss Nelson is missing. They start with renderings, right? So the costume designer sits down and sketches out what she wants the production to look like, she or he. And then you can see some fun renderings there. So you can see even the textures that are rendered there that help tell the story for the stitchers, so they can kind of use that as a guide. Right, very cool. See, in that picture you can see where the actor's head is to be the dragon. So it's very useful when they're building. And then, of course, in a costume shop you'll find lots of costumes there, historical or everyday. Then masks are also a big part of the costume shop, building masks. Very cool stuff there. Costume shops are some of my favorite places in the world. So fun to play. So that was our little tour around Nashville Children's Theater. I wish I could take you into a real theater, but alas, alack, we are an online class. So we'll go through different job descriptions, but I wanted to start by just talking about what designers do. Designers envision the art form. So if you're a costume designer, you make those renderings, you decide what things are going to look like. They're usually creative types. More and more in theater, one designer may work for multiple different theaters and work over the internet. A lot of designers these days work from home and come in for a pitch meeting, but then, the construction happens in-house, but designers are hired out. So I'd like to use Wicked, which is a American Broadway play, as a model. It's the story of the Wizard of Oz before the Wizard of Oz, Elphaba, which is the Wicked Witch of the West, the Green Lady, and Glinda the Good. You may remember her big pink dress from the Wizard of Oz. It's kind of the story of the Wizard of Oz before the Wizard of Oz. So I'm going to show you some pictures. I watched a documentary called American Broadway, and I highly recommend it. It's a PBS documentary, but they talked about the making of Wicked, and it was really fascinating. I wish I could show you a clip, but they don't have it on the Austin P website. But so you can see this is only one of the scenery pieces that Eugene Lee created here. So if you remember, The Wizard of Oz is sort of in the 1880s, the turn of the century, the 1900s, which was a time of industrialism. So in the corners you can see those clocks, and they're grinding and changing, and that was of course meant to represent industry. I think it's also interesting the colors that he uses, kind of Huntsman Lodge sort of green, and that of course points to the Emerald City as well to come. You can't see it, but right above this scenery is a dragon which moves and smoke comes out of his mouth. So it's really a dynamic set, very gold, almost a little bit industrial looking, sort of the inner workings of a clock face, which is really concept. You notice it's not representational. We don't have a tree, we don't have clouds painted in the background. It's more conceptual. So the light design for Wicked feels a lot like a concert, because it is sort of a rock opera. It is sort of a long high notes. When Idina Menzel played this famous Elphaba character, she did it in the same style that she did Rent, kind of loud and very impressive, but it feels a lot like a concert. Another thing that the lighting designer really did well when I saw Wicked was create moods. When the scary part, when all of the winged monkeys climb down onto the stage, there's a nice red sort of harsh shadows. There's a lot of mood shifts, quick mood shifts in Wicked, and it feels very colorful, very, once again, unrealistic, and sharp angles. Another thing you can see that Kenneth Posner here is doing is got haze, which haze is kind of like a fog machine, except it picks up the colors and the lights, so you can see the actual beams of light coming down, which is very much like a concert. So Susan Hilferty, she created a really cool costume design. One thing you'll notice in the costume design is that, once again, it has that turn of the century feel, which is the same that the set has. The costume with the pinstripe pants, that's pretty realistic. It looks like something that they would have worn in The Wizard of Oz. But then she also puts a twist on things. So it's lots of great texture as well. So makeup is a huge part of Wicked, and creature creation. You can see that she's talking to a billy goat there, and he's the school teacher. So he's got a prosthetic nose there, and a wig, and fake facial hair, and then of course Elphaba is airbrushed green every night, so that is no job for the Week of Heart either. So all of these images come together to create one visual image, and all of these things have to have a cohesiveness. They have to work together. If you put a green light on a character who's already got a green face, it's sort of redundant and it doesn't make sense. So you can see the sense of ensemble that the designers have to have in creating Wicked. So obviously for sound design I couldn't show a picture, so I just found a quote. "You don't try to do the sound system for, say, Rodgers and Hammerstein the same way you would Elton John. You respect the natural milieu of the composer. I don't want to make a regular musical comedy show sound like a rock concert. The audience paid $80 or $100 to hear the story, and that needs to come across clearly." So Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote a lot of big Broadway shows in the 50s and 60s, in the golden age of theater. You may have heard The Sound of Music, or there's so many Rodgers and Hammerstein, but they're escaping me now. Oklahoma, big Rodgers and Hammerstein production. So they want to hear the story coming through, and that's a common mistake that sound designers make, is they want to turn everything up really, really loud, to be crass. And so he had a great ear for that. So that's kind of our talk about designers. It's a great gig if you can get it. Lots of fun. Remember, they have to collaborate to create, and they have to have vision. They have to be able to look and have vision and know enough about their trade to know what is possible. Most costume designers are people who spent years and years stitching, and so they understand what you can do with fabric. They understand their medium, right? So some other jobs in the theater. So we are in our book on page 104, and we used the word ensemble, which is on 102 there, but on page 104 we talk about what the producer does, and they're sometimes the person who financially backs the project, but more often they're in charge of negotiating contracts and dealing with the money side of things. Picture here is kind of a Mel Brooks movie making fun of the producer job, and these guys decide they can make more money on a flop than a hit. So they get Matthew Broderick's character there is an accountant, and they kind of fix the books. So it's a really fun musical. If you've never seen it before, I highly recommend it. But the producer is the one who backs the show, finds financial support, negotiates contracts and such, and in some cases the producer casts the production before they hire the director. But in most cases the director is the one who casts the actors. So this is a picture of Denise Hicks. She's a great example of a very visual artistic director. I say visual not in the sense that she's a designer, but in the sense that if you have lived in Nashville or you've been around Nashville, you've probably seen her on a radio interview or a video on the news. She is in commercials for Nashville Shakespeare. She's very much a part of the community. The artistic director is the head honcho. They're the one who everybody else answers to. They usually pick the season. They decide what kind of theater they want to create. Theaters have personalities. They have a certain style that they go with. Now, of course, with Nashville Shakes, they limit themselves to Shakespeare, but they also have a personality beyond that. They tend to have a really creative style. They're not just going to do a Shakespeare play with classic costumes. For Midsummer Night's Dream, they used recycled goods, and they had a hired percussionist who brought a lot of kids into the production. Nashville Shakespeare as a personality has a lot of kid-friendly shows. So the artistic director, once again, hires people, works closely with all of the designers and the technical people, and the artistic director is who everybody else kind of answers to. And so moving on to page 106, if you walk into a rehearsal, so your textbook writer here, he has designed this chapter kind of walking through a day in the life of a theater. And so at 11 o'clock he calls rehearsal. I wish my rehearsals were always that late when I was in repertory theater. Our rehearsals started at 9. Rehearsal... Oh, and repertory theater, sorry, I didn't mean to throw that word out there without explaining it, is where you do plays in rep. So you're rehearsing 2 plays, and you perform 1 play at night, and then the next night you do a different play, and then the next night. So you may have 3 different plays running in 1 week, and you as an actor usually have 3 different characters that you're playing. It can be a little hectic, to say the least, but that way one person can become more of a patron. If I'm running just Hamlet for a month, then you as a patron only come once because you've already seen the play, whereas repertory, we get you in and 3 nights in a month rather than just once. So that's kind of the good thing about repertory theater. The bad thing is that you work your butt off if you're on staff there, because it's confusing with so many different shows running. But anyway, the stage manager is so important. The stage manager has that book in her hand, you can see there, and she follows along. Now, if you're in rehearsal, the stage manager calls time, so they tell you when you can take 5-minute break. They'll say take 5, or they write down the notes that the director has. They also are in charge of the cues. Cues make or break a theater production. So when the lights go out, when the sound comes up, when the spotlight, is turned on, all those different cues, they sit on that microphone and talk to the people in the booth and say, Q1 go, Q1 stand by, or Q2 stand by, Q2 go. So the stage manager runs the rehearsal for all the practical purposes. If you meet a stage manager, they're usually kind of the mama bears of the theater. They are bossy, they have to be, but also kind, and they have to keep people in line and on task. So directors can sometimes be the artistic types, but stage managers are usually pretty practical. So the technical director, we're on the bottom of page 106, sometimes called the TD. The technical director is over all of the rest of the tech crews. Now, there's two different kind of crews. There's the prep crew and then the run crew. The prep crew are the people who build things like the costumes and stuff like that. And most of the prep crew are under the technical director. So the technical director will kind of go through the different shops. In the scenery shop, the technical director is usually a carpenter. Every theater I've worked at, because that's kind of the biggest job often in a theater, is building the set. But they also are over the other shops, so they'll go through and see who needs supplies and work with everybody in creating in what the designers have kind of envisioned. So they're at the design meetings as well. Technical directors, like I said, they work on that sense of cohesiveness and make sure everything gets built, the practical side of things, making sure they have all the supplies and such. So it's interesting, he kind of switches. So we're switching out of the job, but in a scene shop, a lot of what you'll see is people woodworking, and the most common use of scenery in the theater is a flat. A flat is just painted muslin or wood to look like and represent theater. So you can see they have those sort of braces on the back, which I've often tripped over. But you paint the flat and the toggle there, something that you carry it with or move it around. It's just stretched canvas. And so that was just a word that he used in page 106, and thought I'd go ahead and introduce it when he does, and we'll come back to talking about technical theater some more, but that is a flat. And canvas flats are the most common type of scenery. In Alice in Wonderland, we're not using flats. We have built sort of a jungle gym kind of fun scenery, and I'll post pictures of that later as we talk. So, in the costume shop, this is where, when I was an actor, I was often hired also as a seamstress stitcher. And a draper is a person who drapes fabric. So they have to know fabrics really well, and they have to know how to create a certain look. Drapers often work on more complex things like suits or with fine garment fabrics. Drapers are expert cutters. They're often going to do the first step in theater in building a dress, which is to cut the material. So, stitcher is just what it sounds like, the person who spends the time at the sewing machine stitching. So theater's really unique in that it is a handmade craft. A lot of the things that you build, they're unique. They're couture. They're something that other people can't wear. It's one of my favorite things about the theater and being an actress, was getting to wear this stuff. For Alice in Wonderland, I've hired a Hattie, sweet little old lady, and she's sewing a couture Queen of Hearts dress for us, so it's something for you to look forward to as I post pictures from the production. Really beautiful stuff. When I watched the Wicked behind the scenes video, there was a lady just sitting there beading for hours and hours, if you can imagine. It's not done with the machine, it's done by hand when it's that stylized and specific. So that's the costume shop. So another aspect of theater is props. Props is property of the theater. It's what they used to call it. Anything you carry on stage. And so this lady here, you can see all of that stock of of props behind her there. It looks like she's making some sort of table decor, for Alice in Wonderland, our scene with the Mad Hatter. You wouldn't think about how much work it is to create a Mad Hatter table, but with all the cups and saucers and plates, and it's really quite a job. And sometimes the property master also has to create food if it's a staged version that has food in it, although we always hate that. There's also a prop table backstage often for the actors to go and retrieve their props. If you're ever walking through a theater, never eat anything on the prop table or touch anything, because most of the time it will have some sort of paint over it to keep it from rotting. So just be forewarned, never eat anything backstage in the theater unless you're sure it's not a prop. So most props are letters or telephones, something that the actor picks up or carries. It was originally from the stamp. Of course, actors stole stuff from the theater, and they would stamp it to say property of theater. So that prop is a shortened version of property. So all right, so choreography, right? The choreographer is the person who creates movement. We're still on page 108, by the way. So especially if you're doing a musical, right? The gestures, the dance moves are plotted out by the choreographer. There's also a fight director. So in a play with a lot of combat, sword fight or fist fight, there's going to be also a stage combat person. Sometimes instead of full out choreography, a lot of theaters are hiring just dance captains, an actor who's in the show who also sort of creates it, and makes sure that the choreography is staying fresh and looking how it should every night. Remember, safety is always a big concern in the theater. Publicity. So, especially with the way that many theaters are nowadays, and they're competing with all these other events and concerts and movies, getting the word out there is a big part of the theater's life. Really, 6 days a week, an assistant, a artistic director may be out trying to spread the word about their particular production. So there's some images there you see, the phone, the internet, the newspaper, any way that they can get the word out, posters and creating and canvassing neighborhoods with images, cold calling schools if it's a children's theater. You've got to build up your reputation and go out into the community and invite them in. Huge part of a theater's work these days. And also in the modern age, it's important to think of Facebook. Some theaters really have a strong presence, and a lot of their advertising is going on social media. They'll create Groupons or different promotional, bring a friend for free. So it's really an exciting time for publicity, and things are changing a lot for publicity. So, once again, we're kind of jumping back and forth between different styles of talking about things. But on page 111, he talks about 5 o'clock, we're going to have a concept meeting, right? Concept is kind of where the designers come together and discuss the visual elements of the play. And this is really important for the director to sort of steer everyone in the same direction. So if I meet with my set guy, his name is Kurt, and he says, I really want to go with bright colors on this production. And then I go to Hattie, and she was like, I was really thinking pastel blue for the Cheshire Cat. Then I, as the director, need to say, okay, Hattie, but Kurt really wants bright color, so what if we go with something a little more bold for that? So concept is sometimes as simplistic as, color choices, but it can also get very detailed, especially for really intricate productions. So that's a concept board there with different images on it to sort of draw inspiration from. So concept meetings are really fun, exciting times to sort of come together, and usually they go on, a whole year before the play actually opens. Designers are working well in advance on the concept for the play. And the production that you watched of Alice in Wonderland in our last section had a really strong concept. If you noticed, the hatching black lines that were drawn on the scenery and also painted on the costumes made it look like those Tenniel drawings that some of you may have seen in the original Alice in Wonderland illustrated story. Obviously they tried to stick as close to the Tenniel drawings as physically possible. So concept can also have to do with what your inspiration is. What is this piece of art like? And I thought the costumes for the Broadway Alice in Wonderland, the one that you watched, were really, really outstanding and interesting. So, very strong choices. That Duchess scene where she's got the really harsh makeup with the black lines, heavy black lines on it, really strong choice, for better or for worse. So, I thought it was, full out creepy, but really strong concept. So curtain. I've got an image here of curtains, and we've kind of been dipping out between different types of information here. But the curtains, there's of course that front traveler, which is the green one, and that's what most of you think of when you think of curtain. But then you can also see those teasers there, and those are really important for actors to be able to sneak out behind those without being seen. So they also help with the vocal quality so that the curtains are very sound absorbent and help to keep things from echoing. They're hanging on battens there. You can see the back, that is a drop. That fabric is painted and that is called a drop. Would hang behind the actors to represent scenery. So, but what your book means by curtain is the time that you come into the theater. So if you say, your call time, or the time I want you to be there, is an hour before curtain. So if the curtain opens at 8 o'clock, which most do, then your call time would be 7. So in theater lingo, as you're walking around before the play and you hear somebody say, how many minutes till curtain? They mean how many minutes until the curtain opens, that front traveler, and our play begins. So board operators are very, very important. Light and sound board operators. They have to have a good sense of musical timing, and they have to be able to pay attention and stay focused for that long. Nothing is worse than a distracted board op. It is very technical business, but a lot of operators are just doing what the sound designer created, and in the electronic age, many of our computers are able to save the cues. So if someone asks you to run the board for a production, they may just be asking you to press a button at the right time. You'll have a headset on and the stage manager will say, Q3, stand by, Q3, go. And then when she says go, you just press that button. And so that can be really great, and easy in that sense. If something goes awry, hopefully we've got someone who knows how to work the board. But nowadays in the computer boards, it's really quite a lot easier than remembering what sliders you have to create at what time. Obviously for soundboard operators, they have to have a good sense of ensemble and creating, a good musical ear that you can hear how things go. So there's that too. I hope some of you guys are looking for a job, and these job descriptions I'm explaining, this could be, life-changing information for you here. I typoed. That says house manger. It's supposed to say house manager. So in theater, as I've already said, the house is the place where the audience is sitting. That's called the house. So a house manager is the person who's in charge of that 30 minutes or an hour before the show and after the show when the house is open. So they show people to their seats, they usher people in, they're in charge if there's a crying baby or someone texting, they have to go over and kind of ask them to put that away. I've had this job before, and I'm not into conflict, so it wasn't the best job for me because a lot of what you had to do was ask people not to eat in the theater or not to bring that drink in. So it can be kind of an awkward job. The house manager is also over the ticket booth and ticket sales and making sure that that all runs clearly as well. So they're usually on an intercom and can hear the stage manager, and they don't actually close the doors to the outside house until the stage manager says it's time. So then obviously they open it back up at the end and clean up in the house after everyone leaves. So that's sort of a tip to what the house manager does. They have to be very good with the public, but also very firm, which is why I did not make a good house manager. So the green room is the place backstage where the actors wait before they enter. And often nowadays in the green rooms, they have TV monitors which show the production in progress. So it's a place for actors to be focused on when they're supposed to come in and relax between or before production. I'm not really sure why they call it green room. Some people say it's because the first screen room was green. I don't really know about that. Another theory that's in your book here is that they used to call the stage the green, so the green room is off stage there. I thought it was also funny that they were talking about the break a leg, all of the theories that they have on page 114 about breaking a leg being leaning over and getting money, or breaking a leg being stomping your feet. I had always heard that break a leg was one of the platforms on the stage, so if an actor was really getting into it, they might break a platform leg. So I don't know where the term break a leg comes in, but never wish an actor good luck before a show. We're very superstitious. We also don't say Macbeth in the theater. With something as frail as a stage production, you just do everything you can to keep it from going wrong. So a big part of a theater staff is the dressers and stagehands. When I was watching the Wicked behind the stage production, Kristen Chenoweth was just talking about how she plays Glinda, by the way, the good witch. She was talking about how her dresser is her best friend, and she really trusts her to get her in and out of her costumes on time and help her and make sure she looks right. And I've definitely had that experience. A good dresser who you can trust is invaluable. Stagehands often pull the curtains and the levees backstage. They carry furniture on and off. They hand off props or move things around. So sometimes you'll hear them in the theater just called hands rather than stagehands. But they are often dressers and stagehands are just daily workers. They're not necessarily they're hired, on the cruise rather than being part of the house staff. So the rigger, the person who hangs the lights and closes curtains, is called a rigger. They work with the fly system, which is a very intricate, sort of delicate thing. It's done by weights and counterweights. Those rods there you can see, those are called battens, and theater lights are hung on those and pointed at the actors, and of course curtains are hung on them. The flymen have to be able to crawl up on top of ladders and work with those battens, but those battens also come down when you pull the rigging. They work with lots of different delicate equipment, and so if you're ever in a theater, don't ever mess with the curtains. They're really expensive. If you actually touch your hand to the outside of a curtain, the velvet velour side, it can ruin them or wear and tear them. So be very careful around curtains. And they are expensive. Let me tell you, we had to have one curtain replaced when I worked at the high school, and it was $1,000 for one little teaser, one small leg of a curtain. So, can be really confusing how intricate that is, but it's a tradition in the theater, and it serves its purpose really well in creating this illusion of an experience. So, last but not least, we have the curtain call, the time when the actors take their bows and appreciate the audience for their attentiveness, and the audience appreciates the actors for the experience. One thing you may not know is the bow is not actually the time that you lean over. The bow is actually the bowing up of the performance, the standing up really tall before the performer bows. That is, they bow up or bow, and then release. So the curtain call is not always, doesn't happen for every show, but it is a great way to end a play, and the actors come out not as their characters but as themselves. So it's a good chance for them to sort of wipe the slate clean, as it were. So, all right, so that's kind of the day in the life of the theater. I hope you've learned a little bit about how many people it takes to go into the stage. Please be prepared to tell me what these words, all the vocabulary words and the people that we went over today, those will definitely be on the test. So pay special attention to keeping those guys straight. As always, thank you for listening.